Welcome back to Late Night Scrolling, the Canadian pop culture podcast hosted by producer Liz. This week, I'm so happy to be coming to you from Halifax. We are finally back in the studio after a couple days in Toronto celebrating some friends who were featured on the last episode. Actually, yes, the folks that discussed ghosting a neurosurgeon, Luke Hutchie, Matthew Finlan, premiered their season 2 of Ghosting, their show on CBC Gem, last week in Toronto, and I had so much fun celebrating that with them. There were some interviews we did on the red carpet, or the purple carpet, maybe I should say. They're all up on Instagram and TikTok now if you want to check them out. But it was such a fun week of being surrounded by Canadian creatives, people that love our industry, that love Canadian pop culture, that want to make more pop culture in Canada. And it really fired me up as someone that is also wanting to do that with all of you. As much as I love being in Toronto to celebrate all these big moments, I love being by the East Coast ocean air with room to breathe and deep dive into what is happening in Canadian pop culture. And this week is Juno's week on the opposite coast, over on the West Coast in Vancouver. Y'all are celebrating Juno's week. I hope that you're going to see some of the incredible shows. We had it last year here in Halifax, and it was the most excited I've seen downtown in a minute. The shows are so much fun. The lineup is so fantastic. There's nothing like Juno's week in Canada. Let's focus on Canadian music for this episode. All of this started for me a few weeks ago when Avril Lavigne announced that she was going on her greatest hits tour for summer 2025. And the lineup for this tour is so much fun. It's Simple Plan, it's We the Kings, and it's Fefe Dobson. And if you're here on the East Coast, the tour is starting in Moncton and in Halifax, and Fefe Dobson is the opening act for Avril. If you'll indulge me in a White Lotus mimic for just a moment, when I say this news hit like a tsunami on my Instagram stories, every single millennial that I know was posting the shit out of this tour announcement. Now, I live on the cusp of Gen Z and millennial, so seeing all the millennials freak out, I expected it. But maybe what I didn't expect was seeing all my Gen Z group chats light up with people ready to cough up money to the Ticketmaster gods to be inside these shows. And I think that the excitement for this comes from a few different places. Part of it is Avril Lavigne, Canadian icon, Canadian queen, who doesn't love a greatest hits tour? But maybe the underlying thing that's happening here is this intense desire to dive into Canadian staples of pop culture. Canadian pop culture has never been so hot and so in demand. And I feel like this is the perfect time for this tour to happen, to be surrounded by 15 to 20,000 Canadians just screaming the lyrics to songs like What the Hell and Complicated. And if you're coming to the Fefe shows, hopefully we're getting Stuttering as part of that set. And that's the song that I want to talk about today, because I've had this experience with Stuttering that, it's never come off of my playlist, but in the past month, Stuttering has been a connective tissue, not only to connect with all of you, but to connect with people across the country and even people outside of the country. I've gotten comments and DMs from Canadians that are living in Australia, in border states in the United States, in Europe, that have been like, oh my God, I grew up in Canada, or I spent a summer in Canada and I remember this song. Something about Stuttering has come into the collective consciousness of Canadian pop culture. And maybe it's because Fefe Dobson has been releasing new music since about 2022. She had that guest judge appearance on Canada's Drag Race as well. But even with that, there's something with that song that is making it feel more important than ever to discuss. So let's get into it. What's the deal with Stuttering? Is it the greatest Canadian pop song of all time? I'm going to leave that up for you guys to decide, but I'm certainly going to lay out the case for it in this episode. By the numbers, this song should not be in 2025 collective consciousness the way it is. And yet it's going viral on TikTok. When I talk about it, my comments, my DMs get flooded with people going, Fefe Dobson mention, Stuttering mention, I've loved this song forever. It's more than just a throwback. There's a million TikTok audios that go through top 10 songs of 2010, the top 10 songs of 2012. but there's something different about what's happening in the stuttering conversation. If we let just the numbers of stuttering tell this story, this is where the podcast would end. It went 2 times platinum in Canada. It spent 27 weeks on the Canadian Billboard Hot 100 and it peaked at number 10. It did pick up a 2011 MMVA for Your Fave Video, spelled UR, Your Fave Video. That's so 2010's culture coded. And it did win Canadian Radio Music Awards Fan Favorite and the SOCAN Song of the Year. But does that feel like enough for it to have this much relevancy in 2025? I don't think it does. But yet here we are having this conversation. So why is this song not just getting stuck in my head, but causing such a conversation with all of you? I think I've cracked the code of what's going on here, but to really explain it, I have to tell you what happened at the Ghosting premiere after party. You may have seen this on Instagram that Stuttering was played in the pub and your girl got up with Gracie. If you don't know Gracie, she's a friend of mine and she runs the incredible account Backstage Features, which also does Canadian pop culture and interviews. If you're not following, you should be. So Gracie and I are chilling. I'm asthmatic and I'm like, I need to sit. I've been talking all night. I'm needing like a moment to just like regroup. And all of a sudden, Stuttering comes on. And this is where I have to shout out Luke Hutchie because he was DJing this party. And I know it was him that played that song at the moment we needed it. But Gracie and I shot up out of our seats, put our phone on a ledge, and just started screaming this song at each other. And it was magical to be in a bar surrounded by Canadian artists, surrounded by people that love Canadian pop culture. And we were all singing and dancing, and we knew every word to this song. 15 years after its release, we are singing it like it just dropped. And that experience in that moment made me really realize, like, we were playing banger after banger that night. Like, it was Canadian pop all night long. But something is in the DNA of that song that makes it timeless, that makes it fully resonant with life in Canada. Now, a few weeks ago, I also released an article on Substack about Tate McRae and her Canadian pop music influences. And this is where a larger conversation started happening with all of you about stuttering, because especially in the videos I posted to TikTok about this article, I used Fefe Dobson as an example of a Canadian pop icon that clearly impacts who Tate McRae is as a pop artist. And y'all ate it up with me. We had such a fun time talking about stuttering, talking about Fefe Dobson in the comments and in the DMs. And it was those conversations with all of you that made me realize that stuttering wasn't just a song that I could scream with my friends in a bar or scream in my own car in my own playlist. It was a song that we have all experienced and that has seeped its way across all of us in some way. Now, there's a whole conversation we could have about the distribution of Canadian pop music, the marketing of Canadian pop music, and 2010s Canadian pop. But what I want to do is talk about what the song stands for, what the song says about who we are, and why I think it broke through the expectation of being just a 2010 pop song. The formula of stuttering is so deeply connected to what makes Canadian pop rock iconic. So let's break it down. I want to talk about reclaiming the idea of being sorry in Canadian pop music, but I can't do it without like apologizing myself. So forgive the irony for a moment here. I don't know how to edit the song into this podcast without getting like a copyright strike. So you're going to hear me giving you the lyrics of the song and like maybe badly singing some of the lyrics of the song. Please just forgive me and sing along with me. Feel free to pause the podcast here and go listen to the song and then come back, or bear with me through this conversation and go listen to the song after to refresh your brain, because Lord knows I'm a talker, not a singer. But let's get into this idea of reclaiming the apology. I don't think there's anything I love more in Canadian pop music than when an artist talks around or directly to the word sorry. Pop music specifically, and its dependency on relationships and romance and love, has always connected the idea of apologizing to someone you care about to like these earworm beats. But when I think about Canada's connection to apology and how seeped it is in our culture, It makes the idea of apologizing, skirting around apology, or thinking about apologizing in song so much more eloquent. I actually think one of the best examples of this is Justin Bieber's Sorry, which I would say is one of the best Canadian pop songs of all time. He's directly asking the listener and his community, is it too late for me to come and say sorry after all of these things I've done, after all of the times I've failed you? Is it too late for me to say sorry? Is that what you expect of me? Have I subverted it? Is it too late? And it's paired with this earworm that like, da, 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 da. There's your first horrible singing of this episode. But the idea of the apology being something that is so seeped into your consciousness in a way that you can't erase. You're going to be singing it all day. You're going to be thinking of the question all day because it's presented in a way that is meant to not only hook you, but sink into your consciousness and not leave. Is that not the exact idea of what a Canadian apology is? Is that not exactly what the world expects of Canadians when they stereotype our apologies and its significance in our culture? Canada is so deeply attached to this idea of apologizing. Apologizing for walking beside someone in a grocery store, apologizing for simply existing around other people, apologizing when you've actually done something to harm another person, and then apologizing again and again, and bringing over a fresh loaf of bread or a jar of jam or a turkey dinner to express your apology. The sorrow of an apology that you feel when someone else is hurting and it's not your fault, but you still feel obligated to present apology as a way to ease their suffering. In Canadian culture, that is our everyday. We operate amongst each other in an apology forward position where we don't want to impose on the people around us because we have a deep yearning and respect to hold space with our neighbors and to be a part of our community. So much so that the idea of ever doing anything to slash the trust of those around us is like so wired into us as something that we cannot do that we apologize before we even do something wrong. And perhaps some of my perspective on this does come from being an East Coaster where the idea of the apology is like especially seeped into who we are. And maybe some of you listening from across the country will have different takes on this, and I would love to hear them. To me, there's never been a day I've existed in this country where the idea of sorry isn't coming out of my mouth, isn't in my written word, isn't in my text to my friends or my partner, who I know I don't have to apologize to for being late to dinner when I work from home and the kitchen is next door, but I'll still say sorry for walking over a few minutes late, even though it's not an issue, even though it hasn't caused harm. Another example of sorry that I absolutely love in Canadian pop music is in Tate McRae's Exes, because she kind of flips that concept on its head, where Justin Bieber is coming forward with the ask of apology and trying to make room for apology, as we all do. Tate's on the opposite end, saying, oh, I'm sorry that you love me. Change my mind up like it's origami. Ooh, sorry that you want me. And she's coming to apology from this place of, you're expecting me to apologize for the room I take up and who I am. But in fact, I'm not actually sorry. And kisses to you, kisses to my exes who don't give a shit about me. That idea of apology is also so key to being Canadian. I don't know a Canadian who backs down from a fight they know they can win. Fighting is so innate to Canadian culture in a way that I am so genuinely proud to talk about. I love that when you go to a bar or a pub, people are scrapping. I love watching Letterkenny and seeing this representation of like, I'm not afraid to throw down a hockey stick and like throw my elbows up. This idea that we'll fight and work it out is also so innate to who we are as Canadians, because we believe so strongly in who we are, in what our culture represents, in the things that we know to be true, in the values that we hold to be dear, that we're willing at a moment's notice to throw down hockey sticks and fight for them. This whole elbows up moment that we find ourselves in, where it's elbows up Canada against our neighbors and against the world, is such an example of this idea of apology. We're not apologizing for holding our ground and holding our space. We're not apologizing for knowing the truth that we hold so dear. And I love Exes for that reason, because I think in that song, Tate McRae really pushes that envelope of owning the idea of apology to the person who actually should apologize, and not just managing the apology because that is the safe place to operate from. No. I'm sorry that you want me. Perhaps you should think about apologizing because you don't give a shit about me. I'm just going to go on my way, operate under my truth. That's so bold. That is so Canadian. I love how perfectly that idea of us owning our strength and our room to exist and not apologizing for being who we are across the table from Justin Bieber's story, which is so much about owning when you misstep and about wanting to retain trust in community. If we think of those two songs sitting at a table across from each other, then Stuttering sitting at the head of the table. Let me read some of these lyrics to you. There's a whole lot of things that I will forgive, but I just can't take a liar. And she announces that word specifically in such an iconic way. And I know if you've heard the song or if you're singing along to it, you know exactly what I'm saying. Liar, you're a liar. Same way as Tate McRae is going, ooh, kisses to my exes who don't give a shit about me. There's a whole lot of things I can forgive, but I just can't take a liar. Fefe immediately positions herself in the place of, I know who I am, I know my worth, and I know what I'm about. And there's a whole lot of things I can forgive you for. There's a whole lot of apologies I'm willing to accept and make, except when you cross my boundary. Elbows up energy from Fefe. And you see this across that whole first chorus. I was by your side till the very end. I tried to believe you, but something is wrong. You won't look in my eyes. Tell me what's going on. I love that this song comes from a place of boundary off the top. In a time when Canada is literally defending its literal borders and boundaries as a nation, this song is reminding us that, like, we have so much power as individuals to say, hey, I'm so willing to come to the table and be with you. I'm so willing to accept your apology, except you crossed my boundaries, bro, and you won't even recognize that. You threw me in the fire. You owe me some words of apology here. And then you get to the ethos of this song, which is the other party not being able to express their apology. Oh, you're stuttering. Like, hurry up. You clearly cannot get it together. You can't recognize that what you did is harmfully impacting me. You're stuttering. We've reached the point where I can definitively say I think this is one of the reasons why this song has sustained the test of time. This song, at its core, is not just about apology, which is this unifying message for Canadian pop music. It's about boundary. It's a clear example of someone saying, I know where you have crossed the line. I know what I need, and I'm listening actively to you fumbling the bag, and I'm not going to let myself stand for it. I'm going to give you space by letting you go to go figure out your shit, and I'm going to be just fine as you're stuttering. I don't want to hear your story now. You can go figure it out. I'll be hanging out over here with people that have space to apologize for me and can own their shit. It's especially worth saying that women who live in apology culture are always the ones who have to step up with apologies. And that's one of the reasons why I love this song, because Fefe's coming to this conversation with this person from a place of, there's a whole lot of things that I expect from you, and you're probably expecting me to apologize for your actions, but it's not going to be me. It's going to be you. And that firmness and that strength that she shows is so shattering. It is so cool. It is so pop, punk, rock to be able to point your finger at someone who's let you down, at someone who doesn't understand the harm they've caused, and say, actually, it's up to you to figure that out, and I am walking away. It doesn't get more badass than that. And when you ground that in this like apology first culture, Fefe. I'm getting heated talking about all of this. I love it so much. There's another piece of this puzzle I want to talk about. So much of what we consider at a national level to be Canadian pop culture is informed, created, and endorsed by men, and especially white men. Women and Black women in Canadian pop culture specifically have never been given the status that their art deserves. I'm going to have to do a whole episode about Brea Mack Gets a Life because that show, winning the way it did at the Canadian Screen Awards in 2024, getting canceled before season 2, was one of the most like gut punching moments in Canadian pop culture. And it's not something to unpack on this episode, but it is to say that the art that is most impacting our national voice and our national culture is not only coming from white men. It has always been women, and it has always been Black women that have been contributing more than they're receiving to our national voice. This is my side note to say, if you have not watched Brea Mack Gets a Life, that is your homework from this episode. I will talk about that show for as long as I have a microphone in my hand because anyway, I have to stop myself here and get back to stuttering. But to say Fefe Dobson was ahead of her time with stuttering, I think is one of the biggest understatements in Canadian pop history. Would this song perform the same way on radio today in 2025? Unclear, because there are certain pieces of the pop production of the song that make it so iconic to 2010. And Fefe is a child of the 2000s pop punk scene. Like when Avril was blowing up and opening doors for Canadian pop punk around the world, Fefe was beside her with her debut album. And Fefe never got her dues in the Avril Lavigne era. Like her songs did not perform on the charts the way that Avril's did, even though they were arguably as good and sometimes better. But what I will say is Stuttering in 2025, having this comeback moment, Avril Lavigne and Fefe Dobson going on tour together on this greatest hits moment, there's a chance for us as pop culture consumers in this country, as people that love the stories that make us who we are. There's a chance for us to show up for this in a way that maybe we didn't know we should have in the 2010s. Buying physical media to support the Canadian artists that you love, and buying that physical media from independent stores and indies in your community, those are all great ways to show up in community and support Canadian art right now. When I started to make this episode, what I really wanted to do was prove how iconic Stuttering is. But then as I was developing the script for this and really thinking about what I wanted to say, I realized you already know how iconic this song is. You already know that Stuttering is an anthem. You play it in your car, you requested at the pub, or you saw my video of us screaming it in the pub and you asked me, where is that happening? Because I want to go do that too. I don't need to prove to anyone how iconic Stuttering is. Just like we don't need to prove to anyone how iconic Canadian pop music is. We know. We're showing up for it. It's you and me against the world. That's what Fefe said. And that's what I'm saying today on the pod. We can show up for Canadian culture. We can show up for the Canadian pop music that we love. And we can hold our ground against the world telling us that we have a lot to apologize for. They can stutter their way through those explanations, and we can know, y'all sound guilty. I'm on my way. I'm so excited that so many people want to revisit Fefe Dobson. I hope if you have a chance to go see her on tour with Avril Lavigne or in any of the independent shows that she may be playing, that you take that chance to do so. And like I said earlier, Fefe has new music out. The album Emotion Sickness dropped in 2023, and it is banger after banger. If you have not listened, add it to your Apple Music, add it to your Spotify, or even better, go to one of those indie stores I mentioned and buy a physical copy for yourself. So let me go back to the question that we started this all with. Is Stuttering one of the best Canadian pop songs of all time? There is a timelessness to Stuttering. There is a strength in Stuttering, and there is an expectation that is shattered by Stuttering that allows us to come back to it time and time again and recognize the strength that we have as Canadians and as women, that I think cements it as one of the most important pop songs to come from Canada, and in my mind puts it up in the greats of songs that define Canadian pop culture. Woo! That was a fun one to dig into with you guys. I'm sure as we get into Juno's week, there will be more throwbacks and bangers that emerge onto my playlist. So I will do my best to make a playlist of everything that I'm seeing, pop it on my Instagram so y'all can follow along. This is going to be a big week for the podcast between the Junos coverage and then also Canadian Screen Awards. Nominations are dropping on Wednesday, and there are a lot of plans to break that down for y'all over the coming weeks. If somehow you don't know what the Canadian Screen Awards are, it's okay. we're all learning about Canadian pop culture together, but this is like our Oscars and Emmys tied up together. It is the biggest moment for everything Canadian screen related. So of course, I'm going to bring y'all behind the scenes as I've always done in Toronto in May, but also in the weeks leading up. We'll break everything down because trust, these nominations are going to be big. Getting all these nominations at like 7 or 8 in the morning on Wednesday, I end up like putting my head down, turning off my freaking phone, and just cracking like some numbers and stories to come out of it. It's a lot, but it's one of my favorite days of the year. And this is the first time that I'm actually going to have the space and time to do it properly, because usually I've been working a full-time job alongside trying to do all my nomination coverage on the same day. But this is now my full-time job. Thank God for that, which means that I can bring you the coverage that I've always wanted to. If there are shows and movies that y'all want to see coverage of from the Canadian Screen Awards, make sure to leave it in the comments so that I can add it to my radar of the shows that y'all want the filtered information on. I'll see you on Wednesday for all of that. If you're not following the pod already on Apple Podcasts, please feel free to do so and leave a 5-star rating and review at the bottom of the page. I am shell-shocked at how this podcast has just shot up the Apple charts literally overnight. I did not make this podcast with an expectation of charting. I just wanted to have a place and a space to be with you guys, to talk about these things in a consistent way, in a way that like could get to you in the most impactful way I could make. And I'm really trying to process emotions in real time over here, because we went from 157 to 17 overnight. And then we went from 17 to number 10 overnight. And I honestly thought, like, if I posted it, that maybe we could get into the top 100 before this episode dropped. So the fact that we're in the top 10, I'm gonna have to go cry about that some more, but I've been crying too much today. I had to redo my makeup just so I could get this video for you guys. If you're listening to the podcast, you will not notice anything different, but for everyone that's watching this, well, there was a whole outro that I recorded after that, but a phone call came in and I paused the recording and then I restarted it. I lost the whole thing. So here we are. Hi again from Editing Liz. What I was trying to say is thank you for all of your support on Apple Podcasts. It's like a dream I didn't even know I had, to be in the top 10 entertainment news podcasts in Canada. And I'm charting beside my actual heroes, like the podcast that's got John Oliver, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, and Stephen Colbert, Strike Force 5. That is the podcast that we are charting alongside. That makes me feel sick to my stomach with excitement. I'm overwhelmed. I'm just so grateful that y'all care about Canadian pop culture as much as I do, that you're here for this content. It's my dream to make this for you, and I will. And especially over the next 2 months as we have Junos and Canadian Screen Awards, it's such an exciting time for Canadian pop culture. There is so much good art to discover: shows, film, movie, music. I'm just so excited to be here with you every week on the podcast. I'm excited to bring interviews that I've been doing and hiding from you over the past few months. They're going to be yours very soon. Thank you. I'll never be able to say thank you enough, but I will say that's the end of the episode, and I will see you later this week on Late Night Scrolling.